This is my channel's weekly compendium for the week of May 6, 2024. Enjoy. Case file number 1601, written by BITCH, Use the Force, The Eternal Photograph. A few years ago, I was taking a walk to a friend's house that lived a street up from me. The purpose of my visit was to take her a photograph that I had recently unearthed in my bedroom. I had the picture with me when I left, but when I got there, it wasn't in my bag, any of my pockets, or anywhere. So I walked home, tracing my own footsteps back in hopes to try and find it. Nothing. I asked my parents if they had found it. They hadn't. I assumed that I must have just dropped it en route and maybe it had blown away or something. We searched the house just to satisfy me because it was really bothering me. We never found it. That night it rained, so I figured even if we ever did find it again, it would probably be ruined. Fast forward about 2 years later, my mom and I are doing a big clean of our upstairs sunroom / my room. Keep in mind that we frequent the sunroom quite often, especially since we keep our luggage and holiday decorations and stuff up there. My mom calls to me from the sunroom and asks me to come over to have a look at something. She says to me, "Isn't that the picture you were supposed to have brought up to Megan?" And there it was, sitting on top of a box as if it had been there the whole time. No water damage, sun damage, tears, anything. Case file number 1602, written by BoatFricker724. Fish and chips with a side of spicy glitches. So I was in high school, or secondary school as we call it here in the UK. In the 90s, we were allowed to leave school for dinner from the local fish and chip shop around the corner. Myself and friends used to do this several times a week, as it beat staying in school for lunch. Anyway, one day I came back to school from buying takeout food, and I was immediately intercepted by Mrs. Palmer, the deputy head. She almost grabs me by the collar. She's so angry at me. I'm taken straight to the head teacher's office, protesting all the way, and trying to eat my chips. It turns out that I, a person who had been off the premises all lunchtime, had been seen by several staff members and students disrupting a lunchtime detention club by jumping at the windows and doors and swearing loudly at everybody inside. This included Mrs. Palmer, who swore that it had been me and nobody else. So I proclaimed my innocence and asked the head teacher to ask my friends where I had been. The strange thing about it is I grew up in a very rural area, in a small town, with a very small school, only around 100 students or so. Out of those 100 students, only myself and my friends had really discovered punk and grunge music as part of our year group. A lot of farmer sons and daughters. And of all those people, I was the only male student with long hair in the entire school. I got detention and couldn't freaking explain what happened. Case file number 1603, written by Ken TGT. 3 Businessmen Unplugged from the Matrix. My mind is absolutely blown by something I witnessed a few days ago. My brain simply can't make sense of what I saw. I have been working at a busy trade show for a few days. On the last day, I picked up a van rental. I was driving to the venue. Business as usual, and I just finished a call with my boss as I was pulling up to the venue. The last stretch of road before my parking lot is typically very busy with cars pulling up to drop off people, and people walking across the road from surface level parking lots. As I make one of 2 turns, I immediately see 3 businessmen frozen in place in the middle of the road crossing in front of me. They literally have zero motion as if they were statues. Some had briefcases, others had their suit jackets open, and one was in visibility half turned around smiling, as if he was laughing in the middle of the conversation. It was windy, yet no jackets moved. Those briefcases were suspended in the air, but never swung on their handles. The one guy smiling, gesturing back, had his legs open like a beetle on the Abbey Road cover. It was so bizarre because around this frozen group of 3, other cars were passing by and people already on the sidewalks were in motion. This felt like an eternity, but probably within 4 seconds, motion suddenly resumed in this group. It was like somebody pressed play on a remote. They kept walking across the street to the venue. The guy who was turned around to someone resumed chatting it up with his colleague as he crossed the street. Briefcases and jackets and clothing moved and shifted as expected. I was baffled. I've seen weird things like this posted on TikTok of birds frozen in the air or ladies walking on the sidewalk that appeared to be glitched, and I always assumed it to be a hoax or clever editing. But once I saw this, my mind hasn't been the same since. I simply can't comprehend what I saw. Was I visualizing these people before they arrived at my destination when they resumed? Were they indeed frozen? Did anyone else see this happen? Was I simply too tired from working this trade show? And even if so, how did I see something frozen for so long before they essentially resumed motion? My head is spinning, kicking myself for not putting in a dash cam in the rental vehicle. Closest thing I can search that comes close would be this clip where a frozen lady resumes walking. In that clip, the same questions are brought up. Hair is not moving and clothes are not flowing, even though that woman is in mid-stride. But with my experience, it was a group of 3 people, and all of them were held up in time until I drove close enough for them to resume motion. If anyone has similar experiences, tell me. Did you know I have a Patreon? Super quick rundown. I have $1 tier you can just support to support me. Appreciate it. $5 a month for horror story narrations, and $10 a month for my uncut reactions to shows I've never seen before. There's a 7-day free trial. Head on over, check it out, see if you like it. Now back to the stories. Case file number 1604, written by Psychedelic Sulion. The power of my mind exceeded my wildest dreams. In roughly 2002, I attempted to create an object with my mind, something simple and commonplace. I was 16 at the time and I'm 27 now. I had no knowledge of otherworldly phenomena, higher understanding of reality, or even any tangible spiritual beliefs, beyond a rational, logical, scientific approach to life. I'm not sure how I came up with this experiment, to test the limitations of the human mind and reality itself. A strange thing to do for someone who wasn't willing to entertain anything bizarre or wishful. I busted my butt off trying to visualize a pencil on my small, circular glass dining table. This went on for at least 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I really asked as much as I could from my thought processes and inner mind's perspective, trying as many different analogies as I could to understand that my thoughts are not physical, but coming from something made of matter, and thus a pencil is simply matter, irrespective of whether it came from a tree or my own brainwave frequencies. At the time, it was just nonsense in my head. This is my description of what I remember doing. Inevitably, I gave up and just released the tension I had built up, and then as if having tricked my brain, kept trying. I finally moved on, probably got something to eat, but it's not important. Upon making my way to my bedroom to use the bathroom, I noticed a pencil on my large pine table. I had been keeping it clean, with nothing ever on it, not even really knowing why I did that, other than it was fairly new. Sure enough, it's the exact pencil I had been trying to materialize. I was freaking out. I questioned my mom regarding placing the pencil in my room as an indication to do schoolwork. After answering me several times and not believing her, she just stopped answering me at all. I broke the pencil several times, revealing that it had no lead within it, not to mention that it didn't break like wood at all. I can only compare it to a crappy old rubber eraser that crumbles apart, one of those old ones from years ago, or one of those really cheap ones. I thought it was a joke she pulled or something like that. I interrogated her more times after that, until I felt bad about doing so. The lead was only at the tip. It wasn't lead at all. It couldn't even write. Who puts a trick pencil in someone's room after that sort of experiment? She had no knowledge of what I had been doing. She was hurt at my accusations. I would never have lied to me. She meant everything to me. My relationship with her was always loving and reciprocated. Unfortunately, I discarded the remains of it and regretted it dearly, due to losing any proof or evidence. I almost kept it, but clearly thought it was sorcery. If I only had understood it was of my own making. I guess the best part about having had an experience like this, and inevitably realizing no one you ever tell is going to believe you, allows for much higher levels of belief towards other stories. It feels great to know there are other people who experience things like this. It sort of legitimized the fact that I've told this one more times than I can count, and for what? Well, someone has to. Bonus file, written by Bravo Reddit Bravo. The Multiverse's Trumpet. So, the first story. My girlfriend, now wife, and I used to park our cars at the church and take one car together wherever we were going that night, mostly because it was convenient to meet there. Well, one night we came back after hanging out and I walked her back to her car. We leaned against the car to talk for a while. Mind you, there's one light illuminating a massive parking lot. Out of nowhere, we hear this trumpet blast. Like, oh my god, put that thing down and take up a different instrument. It was coming from the very back of the parking lot. Mind you, there are no houses around. It goes on for a few minutes and we are just frozen there. We bailed, never knew what it was. Next, forward a few years. I volunteered with the youth group for a while at the same church. The group decided to have a camping night on the church field. Well, the only catch was we couldn't go inside the church, and all the doors were locked. As it got dark, we realized one of the hallway lights was on. Whatever though, we couldn't get in, so no worries. There was no one else at the church that night. We go to bed. I woke up at 2 a.m. to pee. Mid-relief, I look over and the light is off. Maybe it sounds harmless, but it was accompanied by a paralyzing fear that I couldn't shake till morning. Forward a year. I was outside the church with a friend one night and we were talking. We talked long enough to be the last people there. It was a dark, really quiet sort of night. We, for whatever reason, start talking about creepy stuff that has happened at the church. I tell him 2 stories above. We get the chills and laugh it off. Then out of nowhere, we hear a tree start to fall. Sounded like a big tree. We waited like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. The tree crashed to the ground for a whole minute. We left. Case file number 1605, written by Spartan, 1986. A hero. The ultimate story of survival. My mother tells a story passed on from her great-grandmother during World War II. My great-grandparents lived in Indonesia during World War II. My great-grandfather and his son were taken, put into a concentration camp at the start of the war by the Japanese. Apparently, my great-grandmother tells a story that during the night, a ghost of my great-grandfather appeared to her and told her the house was not safe. Unbeknownst to her, my great-grandfather had died a year earlier in the concentration camp. Freaked out by the ghost, she madly searched the house, trying to find out why the house was considered unsafe. She eventually found a communications radio hidden in a forgotten closet, the kind that had been banned by the Japanese. She quickly destroyed the radio and hid its remains. The very next day, the Japanese ransacked the house, searching for stowaways or illegal equipment. My great-grandmother, a non-religious woman, maintained to her death that the ghost saved her life. On a side note, and more of a story of pure luck, is one about the son of my great-grandfather. After having his dad beaten to death by the Japanese in front of him, he had more or less given up all hope of surviving his concentration camp. However, for strategic reasons, the Japanese decided to disband this current camp, and all the prisoners were released. My grandfather couldn't believe his luck, and despite his incredibly poor health, made his way back home. A few miles from reaching home, he was rounded up once again by the Japanese and placed in another concentration camp. At this stage, he was around 16 years old, and only by the virtue of his health, before the war, and young age, was he alive. A year later, the Japanese running the camp heard word that allies, who at the time were starting to win the war a mere 3 days away, panicked. The Japanese began to make plans to retreat from the camp the next day. However, the allies approaching them were not your usual allies. They happened to be the Gurkhas, an incredibly fit regiment that instead of resting for the night, marched on through. Instead of a 3-day march, arrived that very next morning. According to my grandfather, they pretty much beheaded any Japanese soldier they found, as he distinctly remembers walking over the bodies. The Gurkhas told him to run and go home, and that's exactly what he did. 30 or so years later, whilst reading Wary Dunlop's book, my grandfather learned that the Japanese had poisoned all the prisoners' meals they planned to give them that day, and only due to the fact that the Gurkhas arrived incredibly early did he survive. After the war, he went on to finish his entire high school of 6 years in 2 years, and then gain a degree to work for the United Nations all over the world, helping anyone in need. My grandpa is a personal hero to me. Oh wow, actually tearing up a bit after that one. Bonus file, written by Anonymous. The House of Infinite Shadows. When I was a kid, probably 10 or 12, I was visiting my cousins in a nearby town. They had just moved away and into a new house. We were goofing off in the computer playroom upstairs. The oldest of the cousins was explaining to me and her sister that earlier, when she was passing her parents' bedroom to get downstairs, she had seen the silhouette of a man in what she said was a bowler hat. Whatever that was, I didn't know. Leaning up against the banister of her parents' bed with one foot propped up against it. She said she had never been so scared in her life and bolted the hell out down the stairs. I wasn't particularly excited to hear this, because the only way downstairs was to walk down a very long hallway that ended at that bedroom door, with a straight view at said banister. We finally got the nerve to run downstairs. I didn't look as we passed the room, but never before and never again have I felt so completely and utterly terrified by simply psyching myself out. Fast forward to that night, I was back at my house in bed, trying to get to sleep. I used to put my clock radio on a 30-minute timer and listen to music while I drifted off. I would occasionally check the time out of habit and impatience in falling asleep. I kept getting a very uneasy feeling, kind of like I was being watched. I looked up from my bed to see a shadow person leaning back against my closet door, with one foot propped back against the door. I couldn't make anything out except that he was wearing a round, rimmed hat. What I later learned was a bowler, with his arms crossed. The feeling of sheer unbridled terror was indescribable. I closed my eyes and pretended not to see. I then floated a couple inches off my bed and a foot or so down the bed towards the figure before I landed hard on the bed again. With my feet and shins hanging over the foot of the bed, I froze in terror for a couple minutes before I had the balls to open my eyes again. He was gone, but the time on my clock showed that only a couple minutes had passed, and the same song was playing on the radio. It took even longer before I had the nerve to squirm back up to the head of the bed. I always just thought it was the most vivid nightmare I'd ever experienced, but now I'm not so sure, especially not since I googled shadow people. So thanks for that. In summary, a shadow person pulled me towards him off my bed, a good decade before I even knew about shadow people. I've since found out my mom has been seeing shadow people. She just described them as figures, darker than the darkness around them, all around it for years. Heads peeking out from around the wall on the stairs, figures standing in the hallway from the living room, or darting in and out of the rooms. She never told me about any of this until I moved out. The only rooms upstairs are my old room and my sister's room, and she's been sleeping on the couch downstairs since I first moved out years ago. The only exception to this was when she had friends over, but more often than not I'd find them all sleeping downstairs by the end of the night anyway. I need to talk to them and ask them exactly what it is they've seen. It's just that they don't really talk about it, since they still live there and all. Case file number 1606, written by Hot Fries. The Piercer That Defied Reality. So a while back, my kid got their ears pierced. They saved up their money and I took them to a place locally that specializes in piercing, which is very highly rated. I've had piercings done there, etc. It is the kind of place where you have your piercing done with a needle and then your jewelry, implant-grade titanium, is placed in the piercing. So the kid gets their ears pierced. A few weeks pass, and one day after school, they tell me the post of their earring is gone. The jewelry were flat back posts with a tube-like opening in the front. Google threadless flat back earrings to get an idea of what they are like. Under closer examination, I realize the post is still there. It's just the back of the earring that is closed over it. I'm not entirely surprised. I assume my kid has got ears which will heal up in hours even after being pierced for years. We take them back to the shop, and the piercer on duty is surprised that it could have happened so quickly, but then realizes there is still a small hole left and is able to pop the back of the earring through it. This causes a little pain and inflammation, so they recommended swapping out the current post for a longer one to avoid this ever happening again. They check the other ear and say it looks fine, so we will only do that one side. They change out the post and give the old one to me in a tiny Ziploc baggie, which I placed into a pocket in my wallet. We go on our way and the ear heals normally. But then a couple weeks later, my kid starts complaining of a bump on their head, behind their ear. I took a look and sure enough, there's a red bump on their head in that little soft spot like in between the jaw and the skull. There's no wound and it doesn't look too serious. So I suggest it might just be the longer earring post on that side rubbing against their head while they sleep or something. And we agree to just leave it alone and see if it goes away on its own. Fast forward a couple more weeks and my kid brings it up again. I was surprised it hadn't gone away, so I decided to take another look at it. This time it's bigger and looks kind of inflamed and like it may have had a head on it, like a pimple. I ask if I can try squeezing it and my kid agrees. I do and a bunch of pus and blood comes out. But it doesn't seem empty. There's a weird hole. My kid is only 9.5 years old at the time, so they tell me they want me to stop messing with it because it hurts. I said okay, but I should clean it up first. I get some peroxide and a Q-tip to swab the hole, and I push it on it one last time to get any remaining blood, and something pops out. It's an earring post, but the longer replacement one put in the ear at the shop is still very much in place. I am very confused, because where did it come from? And how did it get in there? The post has 0 sharp edges. Also, I distinctly remember being given the post that was taken out of his ear and putting it in my wallet. But it has to be that post, right? because where else could it have come from? So I go get my wallet and look inside, and the little baggie with the old post is still there where I'd put it. The one that popped out of my kid's head is identical to the one in the baggie. I'm on the phone with my kid's other parent now, trying to explain it, and they think I'm messing with them. I swear I'm not. I have no clue where it came from, or how it embedded itself in my kid's head the way it did. The hole took a long time to heal, and left a really dark scar from having a dull piece of metal deeply embedded under the skin the way it did. I still have zero explanation for how this happened. It's been over a year. Every theory anybody has suggested just does not work, and there's no logical explanation. It's so inconsequential, but so fully bizarre. My kid's other parent tells me not to bring it up, or talk about it because it freaks them out too much, and they feel uncomfortable with there being no way to explain what happened. The steps the piercing studio took made me feel confident in saying there was no error on their end. Lastly, it's okay if you don't believe this happened. I promise I didn't make it up, but it truly is so weird and unexplainable that I get why it's difficult to believe it happened the way I've described. Case file number 1607, written by Glitchy GM DRP, The Enchanted Newborn. This happened about 13 years ago. I think about it often. I have two sons, 14 and almost 13. About 13 years ago, I had my newborn son laying on my bed while I was folding laundry on the same bed. I turned to look at my 1-year-old for literally a minute. When I turned back around, my newborn son was gone. No baby, just blankets. I looked through the small pile of clothes. Nothing, just a pacifier he was using, the feety pajamas he was wearing, and the blanket he was swaddled in. He had absolutely vanished. I looked everywhere around the bed, I even looked under the bed, and he was completely gone. I ran outside to see if his dad somehow had him. He did not. We panicked and tore up the house. About 10 or so minutes later, I hear a baby coo under the bed. I yelled to his dad. His dad Hulk lifts up the entire bed, and there he is, laying directly in the middle, under the bed in only a diaper. It was almost as if he had just fallen straight through the bed, straight through the blanket, through the clothes, just right onto the floor. He didn't even make a sound. He didn't even cry until the bed flew up and scared him. I think about this all the time. Case file number 1608, written by Remarkable Let 251, Doordashed into a warped Hilton. I'll preface with the following info. I have been Doordashing for the last year and a half. I've completed 3,000 deliveries. Hundreds of these have been to the Hilton in downtown Portland, Oregon. When I end my deliveries, no matter where I am in the city, I head towards Starbucks. Leaving the Hilton, this means taking a left. I got a delivery yesterday for the Hilton. I recognize the address. I also know that Doordashed puts you on the backside of the hotel. You have to know to walk around to reach the front. The back end is flat with the road. The front end has stairs leading up to the main doors. I always have to haul my bike up, and it's a pain in the butt. You can enter through the back, but have to go down a long hall to get to the front. I go walking in per usual when I just stopped hard. I wasn't facing the main lobby. I was facing the long hallway that leads to it. But how? I was at the back end of the hotel. How? I was so floored I didn't even realize the customer had walked from the lobby to meet me. I still apologized in complete shock. As I walked out, I grabbed my bike and went down the familiar stairs, hung my usual left to go towards Starbucks. But how? Plus DoorDash had sent me to the normal address, but I had walked around per usual since, reminder, DoorDash always sends you to the back end. Fast forward an hour and I get an address for a hotel I do not recognize. I was confused because I knew the Hilton was on that very same block, but the address was different, so how can there be any other hotel there? When I pulled it up, it was the Hilton. The address it gave me was for what is now the new back end, which made it the street a block down, which I didn't recognize it. The damn insides of the hotel are flipped. The first time I got the address, I always get it, and if I had followed it normally, it would be the back end, but it wasn't. The second address sent me to the new back end, but if I walked around per usual, it'd be at the front, but it's backwards from usual. Everything is flipped. I have no history of mental illness. I've never seen things. I've done hundreds of deliveries there. I know which way that bloody hotel faces. Also the stairs. There are no stairs at the front now. It's flipped around. Anybody know what the actual frickery is going on? That was super hard to explain, but I hope someone gets it. I looked on Google Street View, and the hotel faces the way I'm used to. Literally the opposite that it is now. Literal proof that I'm not crazy. But I'm confused. If I switch timelines, wouldn't everything including maps be aligned with this new reality? Why is it aligned with my old? I'm freaking freaked out though. Case file number 1609, written by ads1179. Was my father a real wizard? This happened 25 years ago, but I remember it so clearly. We would always wake up my dad by going in and jumping on the bed on weekends. He worked a lot and was gone when we woke up most mornings, and home after we went to bed, so weekends were the only time we really saw him. So anyway, my brother and I, are about 6 and 7 at the time, and we go in there one weekend and wake him up, jump on the bed a bit, just being kids, and start talking to Dad. Tap, tap, tap. What was that? I'm tapping on the window, says Dad, who was lying in bed on his back, about 8 feet from the window in the upstairs bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Dad, what is that? I'm tapping on the window. Here, watch. So he puts his arm behind the pillow and shakes it around a bit. A hand appeared outside the window, as if someone was crouching down and just reached up. Tap, tap, tap. I looked at Dad and he just laughed. I couldn't comprehend it at the time. I still have no idea now if it's something I just wanted to see and my mind thought it was there or what, but I've never forgotten it. Case file number 1610, written by La Chica Salvaje, Twisted Time in the Shopping Mall. About a year ago, my mom and I were in the first parking space area of a small shopping mall. She was getting things ready for the store and I was waiting. The space in front of us was a large white SUV. I can't explain why, but I have the urge to study the SUV when I usually don't even pay attention. The family that owned the SUV came out, and it was a father, infant, a carrier, and a little girl. The little girl stared at us the whole time her father was getting her in the car. She had this huge, oversized bow in her hair and a side ponytail, and just kept staring even as they walked to the driver's side. She didn't take her eyes off of us. The father packed her up. My mom also stared at her. It was so strange. We went into the store right after the whole family was in the SUV. When we went to open the door, the same family came out. Odd little girl, father, baby were still holding shopping bags. My mom and I looked at each other in horror because it took him 5 minutes to pack his kids in that SUV. How could he get out and run into the store in the few seconds it took us to walk to the sidewalk in front of the store? We weren't the only ones who saw it. A worker from the food place next to the store saw it, and we all exchanged looks of horror. I have no idea what this was, but I can tell you very few people believe me and my mom. Case notes of file 1601, The Eternal Photograph. DOP, ROP, disappearing object phenomena, returning object phenomena, combined, pretty standard stuff in that regard. Why the photograph? We'll never know. I mean, maybe just because our own minds focus on an object, that is where the cue is taken, for it to disappear or for it to be brought back. But it does explain, and it does crystallize the proof that we need that when an object disappears, it is completely out of phase, unless it goes to a new universe, but in some cases they do just disappear. They de-render. So the sunlight, the water, nothing happened to it because it wasn't in the universe anymore. For a good while. Case notes of file 1602, Fish and chips with a side of spicy glitches. So this is a solid doppelganger story, and they always get me. It's a fun thing to imagine. Meeting your own doppelganger, just not in the context of this story where they frame you, or like in Supernatural with Dean and those damn shapeshifters. I hate those guys. Disgusting. But here's a question. If you saw your own doppelganger in real life, such as walking down the street, would you go and approach them, talk to them? I think I would. Unless I was overcome by an extreme level of fear. I will trust my gut. Case notes of file 1603. 3 businessmen unplugged from the Matrix. I think most people would try to explain this away with the flash mob theory. And those do exist. They're just people that go around and they create a scene of some kind that is weird. Like everyone in a certain area just freezing and stopping to move, which is very cool. Or some people go around where there's only a small handful of people that behave mysteriously and everyone else acts normal. And that would explain this if not for the fact that the clothes and the hair of the 3 people you saw weren't moving. How can you do that? Are these flash mobs able to control the laws of physics and surround these people with a bubble? Were they surrounded by a plastic bubble that was invisible? Maybe? I don't know. It seems like a stretch, but I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they're that advanced now. Deep down though, I think most people listening to this will think, yeah, something weird's going on. The universe isn't always stable, and sometimes it'll apply in strange situations like this, where time just slows down. There are enough accounts of it happening, usually from the perspective of the person where time is slowed down, but from the outside perspective, well, if it lasts long enough in that time frame, sure. I wonder from the vantage point of the businessmen, did they notice the whole world slowing down for them? Now time for the quote of the day. The greatest conflicts are not between two people, but between one person and himself. Garth Brooks. Or at least, they should be. You can't win in life if you're comparing yourself to everyone else in the world. There's too many people. There's 8 billion people. You are not, and I am not, and no one else, well, no one is the best person in the world at any given thing besides one person. Are you that 1 in 8 billion in anything? Probably not. And that's okay. You don't have to be. You don't even have to be 1 in a million. Just be the best you can compared to yourself, who you were yesterday. Try to improve on yourself. It's like those video games where there's time lapse. You're not racing anyone else. You're racing yourself. Try to improve on who you were. Be the best version of yourself. Even though you are limited by your own genetic blueprint, you don't even know what those limits are until you try to test them and push them. Maybe break through them a bit and go Super Saiyan. We've all tried to do that, right? Question 1604. The power of my mind exceeded my wildest dreams. Well, I think we've all done this too, right? Trying to conjure an item from the ether, or trying to manipulate an item in real life with our mind. Telekinesis, trying to move it around or bend it. I certainly did after watching The Matrix. Once you realize the spoon isn't real, then you'll understand. If we do live in a simulation, it's not quite as malleable as The Matrix, because I can believe we're in The Matrix, but I still can't move stuff with my mind, sadly, or fly around. Although I still try, I won't lie. Now in this case, you didn't directly see the pencil materialize. It's altogether weird. How could that be a coincidence unless your mom did it? But it really sounds like she didn't. It wasn't a prank. Like she heard you, maybe you were mumbling about materializing a pencil and then she pranked you because she had a weird one lying around. Maybe. But assuming that's not it, the universe did conjure this pencil for you, but was rubberized with fake lead in the tip? I don't know, that's just weird. Normally, I just suspect if it was a real pencil, it was from a different universe. But this, I don't know. It almost seems like the universe tried to render it from your subconscious's mind and description of what a pencil should be like, but somehow the code was corrupted and it produced this weird fake pencil. Okay, so it's for the bonus file, the Multiverse's Trumpet. So repeating this pattern where you're seeing sights and sounds that aren't real, and with your friend too. It's localized to a specific area, and I guess some entity or force was literally tapping into your minds and hijacking them, creating things that weren't real. And really, of all glitches, that is what terrifies me the most. Anything that can harness my mind or jack into it and, discombobulate it. No, go away. I need to wear a tinfoil hat. Oh my god, if I start narrating stories with a tinfoil hat on, I can't do it. Now time for the joke of the day. I went fishing this morning, but after a short time, I ran out of worms. Then I saw a cottonmouth with a frog in its mouth. Frogs are good bass bait. Knowing the snake couldn't bite me with the frog in its mouth, I grabbed it right behind the head, took the frog, and put it in my bait bucket. Now the dilemma was how to release the snake without getting bit. So I grabbed my bottle of Jack Daniels and poured a little whiskey in its mouth. Its eyes rolled back and it went limp. I released the snake into the lake without incident and carried on fishing using the frog. Not long after, I felt a nudge on my foot. It was that damn snake, with 2 more frogs. You turn the snake into an alcoholic in just one move. Nice. Question file 1605. A hero. The ultimate story of survival. Every now and again you get stories like this one, where they really tug at my heartstrings. If I decide to go into the story blind, reading it with you for the first time, there are times where I get tears in my eyes. It's hard to control. Because I try to infuse myself into the story from one perspective or another. There are stories like this that are just truly heroic, incredible, Stuff of legends, indeed. And then you have that instance where your great-grandmother was saved by her great-grandfather, appearing to her as a ghost. I mean, that's what I would do if I had a loved one, a wife, and I passed away. It's that trope, I guess, of spirits not being able to move on. But yeah, how do you move on from that? You want to stick around until they pass and try to keep them safe. Mission accomplished. Caissons for the bonus file. The House of Infinite Shadows. I've been mulling this over in my head a little bit, and the question is, are shadow people just another variant of a ghost? Or are they souls that are trapped in between universes, stuck in limbo, from a quantum immortality event? We know that souls transfer over all the time between the multiverse ocean. But what if you get trapped in that ocean? Maybe you can try to pierce through, but just not quite. I suppose that is the most melancholic interpretation. Just how aware are they? To lighten the mood, here's a joke of the day. What did one plate say to the other plate? Tonight, dinner's on me. What will it be? Lobster, steak, mashed potatoes and gravy, tater tots, chicken nuggets? It's always a new mystery. But it is the most important question of the day. What will dinner be? Caissons for file 1606. The piercer that defied reality. By process of elimination, I'm stumped on this one. It can't be DOP, because objects don't disappear and then reappear inside your body. And thank God they don't. Never heard of that happening, at least. The only thing that sort of fits is alien abduction stories where people have something implanted in them, but I don't think that's related. It can't be quantum immortality, because both you and your kid notice the anomaly. If it was quantum immortality, only one of you would notice. And it doesn't strike me as any sort of behavior from a guardian angel or even a prankster, poltergeist, or a dungeon master in the simulation. I think it's just down to a classic glitch in the Matrix error. The server glitched out. But at least the post reappeared somewhere that wasn't too egregious, Imagine it reappeared inside his eyeball or something inside his brain. Could have been way worse, but it's still weird. Caissons for file 1607. The Enchanted Newborn. So we know that items can disappear. Pretty common knowledge, I could even say. But humans, living beings, can also vanish. And by vanish, what I really mean is de-render. Sometimes they're ported around via space-time portals, wormholes, if you will, to different locations in time or space. But also sometimes the universe glitches out and simply de-renders the object, or person in this case. And I'm wondering, is it always an error? Or maybe there's a reason to it. Maybe it's related to soul transfers. Maybe if an incoming soul is coming into the host body, maybe it's difficult to do that when the person is currently rendered in reality. Now time for the quote of the day. Clothes make the man. Naked people have little to no influence on society. Mark Twain. Sometimes I've wondered, and I think probably most people have at some point, how would society function if there were no clothes? No one could wear clothes. People just walked around naked 24/7. Well, beyond the hygiene concerns, maybe it would be a good thing. There would be more vulnerability, nothing to hide behind, just this is who we are. Plus, it would be good motivation for people to get in shape, which is not a bad thing. Caissons for file 1608. Doordashed into a warped Hilton. So first off, 3,000 deliveries? Damn, you're an efficient food delivery person, and respect for that, because food is everything. I've kind of thought it'd be fun to deliver sometimes. Of course, dealing with unreasonable people is the issue, but other than that, it could be fun. The solution I can think of to this is that you temporarily visited a different universe. In that universe, the Hilton orientation was flipped, and the text you received was for that universe. And then you came back. Now there is a wrinkle in this theory, as in the original universe, the one you came from, the delivery wouldn't have been made. Unless it was a soul swap. So when you get these weird anomalies where you're in a different universe, but it's not permanent quantum immortality, maybe soul swap. Maybe you don't take over the other body. Maybe the other body switches with you. Almost like an entangled particle. Switching orientations. That's interesting. And yeah, in that case, the you that was in this universe would have been just as confused as you were in his universe. Kind of fits. The mirrored soul transfer anomaly. Boy, this stuff can get complicated, can't it? Hey, did you know I have a second channel where I react to shows I've never seen before? Kinetic Reactions. Link is in the description. Check it out. On to the case notes. Case notes are file 1609. Was my father a real wizard? Was this a tricky, coordinated prank with your mother, perhaps? You mentioned it was an upstairs bedroom, so an upstairs window. Assuming this is a house, she would have to have a ladder that can reach up to the height of the window and have coordinated previously with your father. Now this is possible because it's pretty consistent and predictable that you'd rush into his bed and play with him in the morning. So that I can buy. It's still somewhat implausible, but I suppose it's the only thing I can think of that would explain this. Even glitches don't really account for this. I've never seen a glitch where someone's hand literally dematerializes under their pillow and then reappears on a window. Unless he's X-Men level abilities. Maybe. That'd be cool, but it's probably just a prank and that's still fun. Question to file 1610. Twisted time in the shopping mall. Yeah, so this is a localized time loop. More interesting is having the witness from the food court. So you can summarize this glitch with, do you want some time paradoxes with your glitch? Now time for the quote of the day. You may be deceived if you trust too much, but you will live in torment if you do not trust enough. Frank Crane. Indeed. If you want to have a real connection with someone, you have to invite them inside. And to invite them inside, you have to drop your guard. You have to open the door. Well, you have to unlock the door first and then open it. Make sure the people you trust deserve it. And if they betray that trust, second chances, very thin ice. Make sure they really mean it. And make sure they've really changed.